You know how important visual management is to really get your lean or your operational excellence or whatever sort of good performance out of your factory. But I hear so much different talk about visual management, and they really are not the same. So let's dive into that. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we make operational excellence practical. And in this video, we will be talking about what really is that visual management thing that is so important to all kinds of standardization and lean and operational excellence as well, indeed. And for that, it is good to think about, what are our sort of standards of standards to begin with. And some of them have strong visual aspects, others don't really, but then visual management, it really is not the same as pictures. Right? We really have to separate the visual and the management part, and we need both of them. Now, why is visual management better than sort of most other types of reactive management? Well, we humans like to use our eyes, but that does not mean that any picture is going to be a lot better. What do I mean? If we have sort of this hierarchy of how you can make a standard, how you can sort of help people to do work in the correct way. The best we have is what we call poka-yoke or foolproof. Now, that means that you basically cannot make a mistake. Or in the slightly less ideal situation, maybe you can still make a mistake, but it is so obvious then you cannot continue your work and you immediately have to correct it. Right, so poka-yoke things, for instance, like a true poka-yoke is that extra hole in your sink. Ever thought about that? So if you plug your sink and let the water run, then it fills up, but most sinks have sort of a second hole pretty close to the top that's also connected to the drain. So when your water hits that hole, it flows out that way. Those sinks cannot overflow, unless you plug that hole up as well. But you see, right? So this is really a system that makes it foolproof. But something else, our favorite old USB, it is it sort of seems to have three positions. The first way you insert it, the wrong way, and then the correct way. But the thing here is, it only inserts in one way. So you cannot continue your operation when it's not correct yet. And that's also generally considered to be foolproof, poka-yoke. Completely at the bottom, we see, verbal instruction, just telling you what to do. Quite honestly, quality-wise, that's about the same as not having a work standard at all. I mean, yes, it's slightly better, but not that much, because you don't really standardize how things are shared. You don't really standardize what is happening. That doesn't mean that you cannot get good work, but it's very difficult to get standardized work. And then there's a bunch of them in between. And I sort of distributed it over 4 levels, which is to have an instruction. And this can be a big piece of written text. It can be a video like we do right now. It can also have all kinds of pictures in it. And then we already, get into that visual part, right? So you got pictures, video in it. You, with visual aids, make the instruction better. But it still is a learning document somewhere. It's an explainer. We can also go up one and say, well, we've got this targeted but passive visual. Think about a clear indication of where the lubrication points on a machine are. Or think about a sign that says push this button to operate the elevator or to open a door or to whatever. Right? It's a small explainer right at the button or right at the place where you use it. Active, that's more like a traffic light. Right? It actively makes the changes. It actively indicates when you can drive, when you cannot drive, but also if we're having these things in factories, and there's definitely traffic light systems in factories, like on lights that show whether a machine is running or not, whether there's a problem. But there's also all kinds of other things that you can think about, which is like indicator lights are a very good example of this, or red error alerts on a screen that just pop up when needed. And it doesn't only have to be visual. I mean, an alarm going off That's an auditory signal that is active only when you really have the situation. Then a barrier. Now a barrier, often we think about physical barrier. Doesn't even really need to be physical, but indeed when we think about traffic situations, an actively closed railway crossing, that's an active barrier, right? The pole comes down, you can still, at the more modern intersections, you can sort of drive around it and just sort of half ignore the barrier. Well, here's the thing, half ignore. You cannot ignore that barrier, right? Even those that close only half of the road, they close your half of the road. So you have to actively swirl around them to still get to the other side. But that means that you are taken out of your normal. Now, as I said, they don't all have to be physical. There's quite often used for safety in machines in a factory is a light screen, a light barrier. So there's no physical barrier, but if you put yourself or whatever through in between the two gates, you break the beams of light, the machine stops or gives an alarm, but usually just, that part stops if it's a safety system. Or think of what most computer programs will do. If you forgot to save your Excel file and you want to close Excel, you get this pop-up that stops the closing of the program and asks you, are you sure you want to exit without saving because your file has not been saved yet? Now, just as with that half road beam coming down, the pole coming down at a crossing, you can just click cancel or no, don't save or just get rid of it. It's possible, but you're actively taken out of the flow. Now those middle four, they tend to have the visual elements, but there it is important to indeed distinguish about what those visual elements need to do. So if we think about what that barrier does to you, right? Here it needs to stop your normal workflow. It needs to be a problem, an obstacle, a barrier for you to just continue what you're doing. Now, a big part of that is also explaining why. And that's where the physical element, the visual element comes back here. So quite often, the barrier function itself, that is more of a physical thing. Right? It either stops you physically, or it halts the program, or it shuts down, well, not shuts down, but stops the machine. So that's something physical happening. But you also want to be indicated, alerted to what just happened. So an extra message, a sound cue saying, this is the part of the machine that now stopped. Stuff like that, important to add on to these barriers. But the visual part here doesn't play the most important role. The most important visuals are these two. So also why, the word visual is in here, right? So let's remember again what these two do for you and especially for your management of the process. Here, the big thing is that relevance. So, and that will separate it from, in a bit, the instruction part. The passive visual, so a sign or a bit of text or maybe some sort of indicators just showing where it is, they reinforce the instruction, the method, the standard, only there where it is relevant. And on that place. There is this, and I don't know if Paul Akers made up that quote, but I love it from him, where he says the question to the answer should be there where you have the question. I think he took it from somebody else, but if somebody knows, if you know the original source of that, put it in the comments. So the answer to the question should be there where you have the question. So when I'm at a line and I need to lubricate it. I need to find all of the, maybe I don't even know how, or maybe how many, but maybe from the instruction I know that there's 9 lubrication points. Then a good passive visual management device would be to have indeed those markers saying underneath here, and those markers should be sort of at eye level, right? You don't want the marker to be underneath the machine, because then you still cannot see it. So you have these markers indicating there's one here, there's one there, there's one there. You also have these sort of in the field, right, outside of the factory. You have these marker tiles or small posts or poles that say where a gas line is hidden underground, or where you can find a water main or a fire hydrant connection point, stuff like that. If it has a chance of being hidden, like it's always underground, or it's low and at ground level and with a bit of snow it gets covered, stuff like that, then often on the wall, roughly at eye level, there will be this little sign saying it's 2 meters that way, 1 meter that way, or in yards or feet, maybe in other countries, but to show there where it is needed. Somewhere around here, maybe there is a gas connection. There. The same type of thing. So only where it is relevant do we give the specific information. That little sign telling you at a pedestrian or bicycle crossing at a traffic light, push this button here. That is a small instruction specifically over there. Now, somebody taught that to me as well, mostly verbal in this case, honestly, but at the point where it's needed, that is where you have the instruction. Really powerful stuff. Now, an active visual tells it only when. So it's both where it is relevant, but also only when it is relevant. And I gave that example of the normal traffic light, right? When you are allowed to go, it is green. When you are not allowed to go, it is red. But there's also the on-off type of traffic light, so to say. If we go back to that other traffic example with the train crossing, then having the bells and whistles and the red lights blinking, but no barrier, that also is a form of crossing, and that is that active visual crossing. Usually it just, there's a couple of signs saying, oh, careful, train crossing. But then when there's an actual train coming, the lights go on and they blink and they make a lot of fuzz, basically, together with some noise to give you the cue only when it is relevant. So most stations drive past and there's nothing, but sometimes, hey, something's wrong here, something's happening. The same for your machines. An error message tends to only pop up when there really is a problem. Now, you will have on your machine control systems, you will have all kinds of indicators. How fast is it going? Are all the parameters good or not? But what you would like to do with this active visual management is that as soon as something gets out of your control limits, so a machine error, but it can also just be some value just got a bit higher than it should be, the product is a little bit wetter than it should be, all kinds of things like that. In that case, it's not just a number that changes, but it turns red, or it gives you an extra pop-up message. As soon as you need to really actively click away from that pop-up message before you can continue the process, it's a barrier. But if it's just a pop-up, just a bright color, or a sound, then we're talking active visual. Now, why is this so much better? Because if I always have all kinds of signals coming at me, at some point I'm gonna not see them. Now, a traffic light I will see, but if all of the signs that are next to the road, if they're all going to be with lights and changing lights and stuff like that, it's like, whew, it's a lot, right? There's a couple of signs that I just want active only when needed. Your dashboard in the car doesn't display everything the whole time. It's got a speedometer. It can even be sort of actively telling you you're going too fast, especially with modern cars that combine a bit of navigation and speed together. But most of the lights you never see. Like there's this engine fault light. There's this something is wrong with my brake fluids light. Well, especially that one hopefully never goes on. But when there is a problem with your brakes, you get this red light. When there is an engine problem, you tend to get an orange light indicating, well, it's not as serious as that one. When you turn on your headlights, you get a green light, basically just giving you a bit of information, like a reminder. You got your lights on, but it's green, so it probably isn't a problem. Things like these are active visuals, and they are strong because they only inform you when you need to be informed. So they assume basic conditions unless something goes wrong, and then they tell you. Now the visuals in here, they don't end here. Most of the time, when I talk about visual management at clients, they get to these ones. Now, we have really nice pictures in our instructions, and it does help, and it helps to explain. And that is their role, right? So video content and pictures into your instructions. For some types of tasks, it makes it way easier to explain. And especially like schematics or photos, they really are almost universally adding to your instruction. A video only adds if, so that motion is also important in the work and in the instruction. But the thing is, we're not managing visually, right? So this is just a better way to instruct people. It's a good way to get the knowledge into our heads, but this is just training. Right? This is training, educating ourselves, our colleagues, operators to how to run a line and what parts and how does the screen look like and how to do a quality check and stuff like that with extra pictures. And the pictures hopefully also show us what is a good product, what is a bad product. Maybe there's a video of how to exactly do this analysis or how to exactly put the line into cleaning mode. Really nice. But it just improves the way we draw that information into us. It doesn't manage the process, doesn't help manage the process when it is running. So that's why the visual part of an instruction, it is nice, it does add to the quality of the explanation, but look at these as well. So you have your passive but targeted visuals that are where it is relevant. You have your active visuals that only light up when it is really relevant. And then you have your sort of more than just visual. These are complete kinesthetic. They touch you in a certain way, but this can be in part also just with visual things like big alarms and stop things, indicator signs that help a barrier to stop your normal flow and to make it super difficult to just ignore it and continue. All of those should be part of your visual management. And indeed, if you get to Poka-Yoke, solutions that is, you can't really get your factory Poka-Yoke, but every solution that you can make foolproof, that one doesn't really need any of these now, does it? So also think about that. If your standards management is good enough, if it's foolproof anyway, you don't really need to instruct. If there are physical barriers in place, the instruction, the passive visual, they can be a lot lighter. If you have good, specifically where relevant, instructions at those workplaces, then your normal instruction doesn't need a list of pictures of where you can find the lubrication points or something like that, right? Because honestly, giving me a schematic when I start working a specific line or workplace, giving me a schematic of where the 9 lubrication points are. Also giving me a schematic of which temperatures to set. Also giving me a schematic of where the emergency stops are. And you get the drift, right? When you learn to operate a new machine, you get loads of instructions. So giving me, in a very nice overview, those 9 lubrication points, yeah, well, it helps, but I'm probably going to forget them. So I sort of need to have that picture with me anyway when I go and do the lubrication the first couple of times. You can ignore it if you just say, hey, when you do lubrication, find all of these points. And by the way, on the lubrication checklist is the number of points that you need to find. Done, right? So if you can get these to be better, you don't really need the lengthy instructions. If this is good enough, you don't even need to put stickers everywhere on your machine. That is the power of true visual management. So next time that you want to up the standards management, the visual management in your organization, go beyond pictures in your instruction. In fact, go way beyond pictures in your instruction and think how you can use visuals, interactive audio cues, kinesthetic barriers, right? How you can use all of that to make your processes more stable. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do hit the like button if you did, and I'm very open to suggestions for video topics. So if you have a question, a remark, or just a suggestion for another topic for me to cover in one of these videos, let me know in the comments below. For now, I wish you the best of luck improving the management systems in your factory. And as always, don't forget to enjoy the continuous improvement journey.